Well, good morning to you. It's a pleasure to be here again and to celebrate the day with you and to celebrate confirmation and reception. We have a fine group that's hidden over here for the moment, but it's good to be here. One of the 8 o'clock crowd said, "Oh, you get to come with your wife every once in a while." And I said, "Yeah, that's true. She comes here at 8:30 frequently and loves to be a part of this community, and today I get to do that for 8:30 and 10:30, and I'm delighted to do so. So it's good to be here. And it's also a good thing to be able to thank Sarah and Ty for your love and care of God's people in this place, for the leadership that you exercise and the good work that you do. Your bishops are grateful. Thank you. This is not an ordinary Sunday in the visitation scheme of things for a number of reasons, most of which has to do with the tragedy in Newtown, Connecticut. And I don't think as a bishop or as a community we can just sort of pretend that that wasn't there and go cheerfully on our way. This is an interesting Sunday in light of that tragedy. The pink candle comes from a tradition where Advent was looked at as a little Lent. And after spending 2 penitential Sundays, the pastoral response was, well, let's give them a break and we'll sort of lighten up for a Sunday. In the old lectionary, this was always the Sunday that the Annunciation was read, the Magnificat was sung, and there was celebration and thanksgiving of Mary. And it was just sort of a day to lighten up. It was called Gaudete Sunday, Praise Sunday. It's also the case that we lit, as the family here told us, the candle of love today. And I think that's a poignant and significant kind of peace. Because Advent is really not a little Lent. The reason for Advent and Christmas is not first and foremost the fact that we have all sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. Or in a more Calvinist mode, that we are depraved human beings, and without God, we aren't going to the kingdom. That's derivative. The first most important thing about Advent is about the choice of God and freedom to draw near to us and to make it possible for us to draw near to God. And there was only one reason that God chose to do that. And it's in 1 John 4:8. 3 words. God is love. The incarnation is first and foremost about the first and foremost fact of who you and I are. We are the beloved of God. We are created in God's image and likeness. We are empowered by the Spirit to be bearers of God's grace. And grace, my brothers and sisters, is not some abstract something. Grace is God's ongoing self-gift in love to us. God each day gives God's self to you and to me, so that in the profundity of our humanness, we can give that gift of love in our daily life. And it's very hard, I think, to live in that, to rejoice in that, with the other truth about how the world is. The truth that was embodied at Sandy Hill Elementary School in the deaths of 26 and 7-year-olds, and in the death of 6 of those who taught them and loved them, and in the death of Adam Lanza. It's a horrendous tragedy, and we cannot fix that. We can't go back and replay that day. We can't fix the fact that nobody in Newtown has not had their life changed forever. We cannot change the fact that those parents have experienced the worst nightmare of any parent, and that is the death of a child. The death of a child by violence is an unfathomable, incomprehensible horror. It is a quintessential embodiment of the darkness and the brokenness of the sin that qualifies all of human life. And there are a range of feelings. There's the range of heartbreak and despair and devastation, of anger, of just sheer shock that innocence and safety and certainty and healthiness and goodness has been shattered. And we can't fix that. Where is the God of love? We can't heal the hearts that will always be wounded. But we can do some things. It's sort of like being in the, well, let's do it this way. There are some things that we can do. And I think Newtown showed us the first most important one in their reactions immediately after. In the midst of what shall we do, what can we do, they gathered to be with each other. They gathered to be community. And they gathered to pray. And it really is true, when all else fails, pray. When all else fails, God draws near in such a way that we can draw near to God and simply pour out our hearts. Pour out our rage, pour out our powerlessness, pour out our hurt and devastation, pour out our love, pour out our sorrow. We can feel from the depths of our hearts, those of us who are parents, depths that are overwhelming. We think of our children and we hold them. We think of our grandchildren and we hold them. And God draws near. God doesn't draw near to say, oh, don't worry, or I'll fix this. God draws near so that we can draw near to one another. And that is what we can do. That is our prayer. That is our love embodied. And we can draw near in the fact that there is one who lived in such darkness, such deep and utter and profound darkness, that out of that darkness came this horrendous tragedy. Came this killing of little guys and their teachers. And we can't explain that. We can't explain that. There's just no explanation for it. And it's sort of like explaining to a parent whose child was hit and killed by a car that the reason your child died is the physical principle that two masses cannot occupy the same space at the same time. Well, that is true, brothers and sisters. But it's TBU, true but useless information. Father Paul Winton, who's the rector of St. John's in Charlotte, wrote to his parish. And in that letter, a poignant paragraph was written of a very hard truth. That at some point, what God calls us to do in God's drawing near to us and our drawing near to him is to forgive Adam Lanza. Now, I don't think anybody probably is anywhere near that place right now. But it has to be said to us. In the same kind of way that at funerals we preach Easter sermons. It's an Easter liturgy. Not because anybody there is at Easter. Most of us are stuck somewhere in Good Friday or Holy Saturday. But somebody needs to remind us that ultimately it is about Easter. Ultimately, it's about forgiveness and reconciliation and new life. That there's a place to go to, a forward movement to be done. It's not about being stuck in the darkness of sin or the terror of Good Friday or the sorrow of loss in death. It's important that we remember those little guys. I remember when I was a teacher, I taught fourth grade, so my kids were a little older. But what everybody in our building knew was that when you were not having a very happy day, what you would do during recess or at lunchtime is you'd go down to kindergarten and you'd sit on the floor and be renewed by this unbridled enthusiasm for learning, an unchecked capacity to love, the gentle pats on your hip because they couldn't reach any higher than that. And we used to look down and say, "You patted." And they go, "Yeah, Father Gregg, I want, And off we'd go into a conversation. I think that it's important to remember. It's important to remember that lives were lost. It's important to remember that even though they are now dead, both the adults and the children, that their lives mattered. For 6 or 7 years, those gifts of God in this place brought very particular, wonderful gifts. And that mattered. That too leaves Newtown changed forever. The teachers brought things and gifts that mattered. And that too changed Newtown forever. And the thing that we can most do moving forward is to honor the matter, to honor the lives by living ourselves. We're alive. We're still here. And to honor them by living well and faithfully. To honor them with a determination that no matter how dark it ever gets, we will not submit to that darkness. And when that darkness overwhelms someone, we will mourn and we will draw close to God, and we will open ourselves for God to draw close to us. It matters that we live. It matters for us. It matters for this parish. It matters for the honor and the holiness of the lives of those children and their teachers. It matters for the parents who are devastated, for the community that is racked with grief. It is not simple. The darkness is not gone. The darkness will be experienced again. But in faith, what God has promised us is not death and darkness, but light and life. What God has given to you and to me is God's own light to bear into the world. What God has given to you and to me is the opportunity, as best we can, to bear that light so that it gives life, so that no one is left floundering in the darkness because we haven't bothered to pay attention. It isn't easy. And shortly we're going to reaffirm our baptismal covenant, which is our commitment to this, to be bearers of light, to be bearers of life, to be faithful. And I want you to pay attention to the key phrase in the covenant. It isn't, I will, or I will by myself. The covenant asks if we will do the life of God in us with God's help. With God's help. With God's help. Embodied here. Living here. And with God's help, we come today to receive God's presence in the sacrament. That God comes in the sacrament of body and blood of Christ to know, so that we will know that God is here. So that we can draw near to God and take God into us in the sacrament. And so that we know, strengthened and fed by that sacrament, it's possible for us to go out into a world that is riddled with darkness, but born of light, that it may be more light, that we have the capacity by God's grace to honor the dead by living well and faithfully, and we will do that. I will do that with God's help. I will do that with God's help. So let us remember this day with thanksgiving. Those 20 little guys, their 6 teachers, and Adam. Making space for Adam is the hard part. Making space for Adam is where the love and the grace is. Making space for Adam reminds us that those children mattered, that those teachers mattered, and we will not forget, and we will live well, and we will live faithfully with God's help. Amen.